And with no further ado, I'd like to invite our guests to join us for the chat. Today, we are joined by an incredible group who have offered to share their insights with us. So first, we have producer and writer Heidi Lynch. We have showrunner Jennica Harper. We have writer Harun, director-producer Shane Belcourt, and I will pass it off to our moderator, Lauren MacKinlay. Lauren is the supervising producer on Transplant. Thank you so much, everybody. Welcome.
Thank you, Katie. All right. Hello, everyone out there. As mentioned, my name is Lauren MacKinlay, and I'm thrilled to be here with this exceptional panel of creators talking about the thing that has been getting us through the pandemic. No, not crying, television. Before we start, I'd love to just go around and get a brief intro from everyone so that you're aware of all of their amazing backgrounds. And so let's go, Kara, Heidi, Shane, Jennica.
Okay, great. My name is Harun. I'm a writer, have been an actor, musician, producer, whatever anyone will hire me for, but mostly a writer. I've been in rooms before and I've written for a lot of children's TV. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. I'm Heidi Lynch. I came to the industry through acting, but I'm a writer. I love producing. I'm a writer, producer, and I play Molly in the web series Avocado Toast that is on Out TV.
Hello, this is Shane, trying to follow the first math problem of the day, the order. Sorry, I'm swallowing on the math. I am so excited to be here. On my eyeline I'm working on, I'm not an actor. So if I look around, I'm trying to see what's going on. And I hope I do okay today for you guys. My name is Shane Belcourt. I'm a producer, director, and a writer. I grew up in Ottawa. My family's from Laxanan, Alberta. So when I speak a lot about the projects I've worked on, which are Indigenous focused, it's because my family's Métis from out that way. And I'm speaking to you in my home in Toronto, and I'm thrilled to be a part of this panel, and I hope to get serious at some point.
My name is Jennica. I am writer by nature and desire, and that has also made me a producer. So currently co-creator and showrunner of Jan, which is on CTV and Crave, and was recently picked up in the States by Hulu, which is really exciting. And also work in drama and have written in kids TV. And I've been lucky enough to kind of be able to do quite a variety of work in my career. And I hope I continue to get to do that.
I think there's quite a variety on this panel, so it's
Yeah.
very exciting. We're going to try to cover as much as possible in the hour that we have each other. And so I want to start first with the creation process, because I think a big question that always comes up in TV is, how do you know when an idea has enough life to sustain an entire series? And I'm going to put Jennica on trial first with that excruciatingly general question.
Okay, so I'll talk about Jan specifically. I certainly have created other shows, but this is the first sort of major network show that has gone to, that's on TV. And I was brought in early in the process, but did not, the Jan story did not originate with me. Jan herself, Jan Arden, and a very funny and talented writer named Leah Gauthier, who was Jan's friend, came up with the idea for Jan to do a scripted comedy that was, poking fun at herself and highly fictionalized, a version of Jan that is very unlike the real Jan Arden. And they brought on producers Project 10 Entertainment in Toronto. And they went to Bell, which was a natural fit for a couple of reasons. I mean, I think we could have gone to a few different networks to try, but Bell was a natural fit at that time. And Bell said, yeah, we're really interested, and we want you to bring in an experienced writer and producer and who's going to help, actually translate, because neither Jan or Leah had that particular experience. Mm-hmm. And so they went sort of showrunner shopping and met with a bunch of writers to talk about who might be a good fit for, to get people's takes on the idea and to see who might be a good fit personality wise. And when I went into my interview for this, I've told this story before, so I'm sorry if you've heard it before, but I was very sure I was not getting the job because I thought, well, I haven't showrun yet. I was a senior writer producer in writing rooms, but I had not showrun before. And I thought if they're going to give a Jan Arden a show, which seems like a no brainer to me, I'm sure they will go with someone very, very experienced as, in that leadership position. And so it was very freeing because I just pitched my ideas and I pitched my little heart out and I loved the idea. I thought it was a very funny and natural idea for a comedy. And so I think that helped me that I didn't think that I had a shot. So I was very able to be relaxed. Otherwise, I think I would have been really nervous. But we hit it off personality wise and sense of humor wise. It was a really good fit and they liked some of my ideas. So that's how I kind of came on board. And that doesn't really answer the question, does it? In terms of,
so to see how different like marriages happen, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a bit of an unusual one because it is a vehicle for someone. I have no illusions that it's like my brilliant pilot script was why we have a show. If there wasn't a good script, we wouldn't have a show. But at the same time, there is star power there, and the show's called Jan. Like there's a human being that people want to go see, and that's what a huge advantage. Obviously, that's sort of like in terms of having a property or whatever. That she's our property. I mean, she's not our property at all, but you know what I mean. She's the the sort of big hook into why people will come check it out. Hopefully, I help make people stay, but she's the face and name.
Yeah. When there's someone as big as Jan Arden, like, that her life is proof that there's life to generate a series.
Yes. In terms of the legs. Yeah. And I guess just to answer your actual question about how do you know there's sort of legs there, we did try to, in the fictionalized version of our show, create sort of a central conflict that we felt that we could have a push pull for her for quite a long time. She's playing sort of a woman of a certain age who has, she kind of feels like her glory days might be in the past. Our version of Jan is less successful than the real version of Jan, but that's how we're doing it. And so she wants to sort of get her career back and she's really ambitious, but at the same time, she's got family kind of pulling her in different directions. So we kind of felt like that was a good sort of tension to be able to maintain for a long time. It's sort of like, can she have both of these things, and how do you balance those things, and screwing it up and making the wrong choice, and that seemed like good, a good central conflict for us.
Yeah, and obviously it's doing quite well, so you were right. Kara, I know that you have done a lot of younger demographics, but also you've done sketch too. So I guess same sort of question for you. When you're germinating on an idea, like how are you figuring out where it fits and how long it can go for?
So for kids, it's kind of, there's such specific worlds and there's mechanics to everything. So if you look at how the mechanics make up the show, because for preschool, mechanics is really important. It's very important to have like a structure and predictability and all those things. But then as you get older, it gets a little freer. So I think literally I'm thinking about an engine. If there's blocks that go together and that makes sense and that you can generate, because for animation, sometimes you got 26 episodes, sometimes you have 52 a year. So that's where you really have to be like, plug and play a lot of things, because you're going to be also introducing a lot of writers into that situation so that they can then go wild with their ideas. So you kind of have to have a simple structure sometimes, or at least base characters, and then you can go lots of places, but you need that structure depending, and educational is different, right? Mm-hmm. So it just depends on what you're going for and what your network is.
Right. And then Heidi, so Avocado Toast for you, that was the first time you've created a web series. And so for you approaching it as an actor, can you tell us a little bit about that creation process?
Yeah, I mean, I think my confidence was low about it. And I really needed somebody outside of Perry and I to tell us that it was worth making, because as you all know, it takes years and blood and sweat and tears. You have to really believe in this idea. And we were lucky. We applied with a very early draft that was truly not very good to the Cale Chernin Awards, and we got shortlisted. So that was just a little bump of confidence to say, okay, the kernel of this is interesting to a group of people who are outside of our brains, and they're reading a story that we think is really good in our little bubble, but I did need somebody else to say, whoa, I've never seen this. I'd like to watch this. And then the other thing that really propelled me forward personally was making a trailer. We are working in digital content, so this is going to live on the internet, not on TV, and connecting with people on social media in that 18 to 24 or 35 age range who really needed bisexual representation the way that I needed it, which was the reason why I wrote it. And every time someone would comment or DM us and say, oh my God, I've never seen this story. This is my story. This is helping me. It became outside of myself. It wasn't just important for me to do. It was something that I thought could maybe help other people. So that's sort of what kept pushing us forward.
And just because a web series is kind of more limited in time, that doesn't mean necessarily that it's limited in scope. And I feel like with yours, it could have just been about two millennial leads, but the fact that you crafted an intergenerational comedy and that you stuck with that really speaks to the strength of it and the longevity of it. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we had meetings with a certain production company, many meetings where they really wanted us to axe the older women characters. And we just knew from the get-go we weren't willing to do that. And it was funny because it was our first time trying to make a show and someone might be picking it up. And part of me was desperate to be like, we'll do anything. But I mean, Mag Ruffman is one of my very best friends. She's a mentor of mine. And much like with the Jan Arden show, like I am dying to see women 50 and older play vivacious, sexual, beautiful, hot characters because that's what they are to me. So it was really important from a producer's point and a writing point. And I just think that mother-daughter relationship is really important to investigate and deserves to be represented. So hopefully we got a bit of that across in the 15-minute, 10 episodes. But
oh, I definitely think so. And I think we're gonna, I want to circle back to knowing when to stand your ground. But before we do, Shane, Amplify is such a beautiful music doc series. I highly recommend everyone check it out. But when we were talking a little bit, you explained how you're kind of more like a director who writes by necessity. So I just would love for you to share how the creation of that series came about. And as someone who like doesn't pitch themselves as a writer first, someone who hadn't done series, kind of like how you sold yourself as the guy to pull it off.
Well, first, I tried to pitch a show called Shane, very similar to Jan, and nobody was interested in my core conflict, which was, there's so many core conflicts. They said, you got to focus on one, Shane. And I was like, oh my God, where do we end? No, so Amplify was, God, I feel kind of guilty saying this, but it was kind of easy. I know it's like a jerky thing to say, but it's sort of like what happened was a producer said, Shane, a broadcaster, a PTN in this case, is looking for a music documentary series. We're thinking maybe biographies. I write back in the email, I don't like biography documentaries when it comes to music. You know, they need to be about something larger. I love the way that Chef's Table works, where it's biography, but it's also about their story and about the place they're from. And I love this Dave Grohl documentary, Sonic Highways. So if I were to do a documentary series, I would only be interested in doing it if it was this, and it'd be this long, and I'd have these kinds of things. So take it or leave it. And then they said that to the broadcaster. The broadcaster said, we love it, do up a pitch deck. So I said, okay, well, here's the pitch deck. It is by the minute, by the acts. This is what it would look like. This is who would be in it. There. And everyone said, great. And then we made it. So it was really, really fortuitous and lucky. And I think if there's a cosmic reason why it happened, it's a documentary series that allows space for a director, a songwriter, and their inspiration. So there's 3 Indigenous creatives that are getting to make something that's really passionate and ties them together from where they are in their lives. So the opportunity was really for other people to create amazing things. And that's why I think it happened and why it was so lucky. And it had very little to do with me other than just wanting to create something that would be a chance for other people to do their thing. how, why anybody would trust me to do anything. I don't know, because I'm enthusiastic. But I think really if you go back, I had done things as a director, and when you work as a director, other directors who might be in the room or whatever this thing is, like we're very often in low budget things not asked to just walk in and direct. You're involved in pre-production, in pitching, in forming the idea, very much like Heidi was describing in her series. You're involved in you selling the project. You're a part of the sale of the project for the independent cinema and documentaries that I've been a part of for years. So it was just a natural progression to kind of move away from just being a director for hire to then, working in room. I was in the Trickster writing room for season 1, and and then those are times when you realize I'm not really a pure writer, which is really a great freeing thing to go, oh, I'm not a writer like this guy, Chris Roberts. That guy's a writer. It's like, oh, I'm sort of a director, producer, guy with ideas who likes to story edit and just make space for people to do great things. So maybe that's a producer. So it kind of just happened. I've fumbled into this, even into the Zoom.
We're glad you made it here. But I think you touched upon something interesting, as have several panelists. A lot of reason opportunities come up is relationships with broadcasters or production companies. And I mean, maybe I'll circle back to you, Jennica, but as you're bringing partners on board or even being brought on board, what are you looking for in a partnership with a production company?
That's a great question. Of course, you have to, I think, be sort of have a shared vision, or at least if it's your vision, that I think that your producers have to really be able to get on board with that vision. Mm-hmm. And I think, Heidi's, which I'm sure we will talk about at some point, but the idea of how to stand your ground, it's a big one. It's really challenging, I think, to get to that point where so it's awesome that you were able to do that right away. You're like, no, not going to do that. It's great. I'm inspired. I think that it's a shared vision and it's trust. And I know that we sometimes come at it from different places. The creators coming at the material from a different place than the creative, the producers who are truly trying to make something happen without necessarily be the ones driving the creative. It's sort of, I don't know, that if you can find that trust, that's what it is. It's sort of like, then those are the people who will have your back when you say, I have to push back on this note or this suggestion. I have to be able to say no to this. And your producers hopefully are people who will be like, yes, we have your back. We will support you on this. And also, I think will be people who are champions of everybody involved in the project and the material. And also, it really is like just a partner. It's another partner. You might already have writer partners and director partners, but then those producers kind of have to be there holding your hand too. I think it doesn't really work if they're not.
Mm-hmm. Kara, I know that we talked a little bit about in our pre-call, secret, not so secret anymore, about how specific it is with kids. And so, I mean, expanding this question to include production companies, but also like broadcasters and streamers, like how are you crafting those partnerships?
I have a writing partner as well. And so both of us had connections. So I had connections at TVO because I started as a TVO Kids host. And then she worked with another production company called Fifth Ground Entertainment. And we sort of just kept meeting people. So it's really about networking a lot. And then we would get hired on other production company shows, and we'd go to JFL and pitch. Like we've done all those things in order to try to make those partnerships. And then what happens is you find out what that flavor of the network is. Because with kids, every network is so specific, whether it's educational, whether it's Nickelodeon, Disney, like they all have their specific, really specific voice that they want to give out. And so it's only through meeting those people and having those pitch meetings and listening as much as you talk to see what they need, you know, and seeing what they have on their roster and what they're missing, you know. There's a lot of content out there for kids too.
And let's flip it. Like, what are some things that you're looking for that a production company or a broadcaster can help when you're developing your series, for anyone who'd like to take that? I think
Yeah, I think to speak to what's already been spoken to, but just an ability to follow my lead creatively. You know, it's not that it's not a collaboration, but I need their help doing the financial side of things, which I'm slowly learning how to do now too, because I really do want to be in producing for a very long time. But especially with that initial project, like it was my story, so it was gonna have to be the way that I wanted it. And it's Perry's story, and we were quite dead set on the thing that we were gonna spend the next 4 years of our lives trying to get made, you know. But we needed the harmony of somebody else to come in and support us. And we were very lucky. Mag Ruffman mentored me a lot. She's a wonderful producer with Ruffman Entertainment. But we got connected with Out TV first, and they have the initiative to make queer content. And happily enough, they were having a new initiative to promote more female filmmakers and female content to broaden their audience. And they were the ones who wanted the show and said, you need to work with Charlie David at Border to Border. So we had a meeting with Charlie, and it was just it was luck, you know. He's amazing. He's an artist himself. He directs, he writes, he has created so much queer content, and that's his passion, to create representation. And he was so excited to get to work on a female heavy set, crew and cast and showrunners and producers, and it was just a perfect mix. But there's always space for him to voice his creative ideas or how he's receiving things or when he's confused, but he really did let us sit in the driver's seat the whole time.
And Shane, I know that you've had a couple of repeat partners, people that you've continuously worked with on projects. What is it about those people that keep you coming back?
That they'll tolerate me. I think it's the guy I write with, Dwayne Murray. I've known him since grade 9. Michelle St. John, who's a producer on a lot of things. We have a production company together, Dwayne, Michelle, and I. And I've worked with Michelle, God, I don't know, over 15 years on different things, passing through the Indigenous cinema community. And, you know, so it's just one of those things where you make a connection to people, and they have your back and you have theirs, and just feels like family. And I guess I'm latchy that way. And I would say, you know, just in terms of the other question of, like, you know, what you're looking for, it's kind of, I always think of it as, like, after you show something, in one of the worst questions you can get is like a tech thing, like, what was your budget, or what did you shoot it on? You know, some people ask a director that. And so those are the things where I feel like I must have missed the mark if we're only talking tech, or how much is it going to cost? And then you have those meetings with partners. And that's what I love about Dwayne and Michelle as an example. And that could be a broadcaster or another production company and a co-pro. I had this amazing meeting yesterday with a broadcaster, and we just talked about the spirit of the story. You know, who we are as people, how we connect to the story, you know, what purpose would the story have in the greater context of an audience in this particular time. Those are the exciting collaborators, and that's the stuff I want to talk about as a creator. And so, you know, when those are the most interesting parts of the job. And if it's a partner that's more, you know, angling for what do I get out of it, it's less enjoyable. And if it's a broadcaster that has notes that are, it's hard to be emotional, right? It's hard to have an emotional space as creative people with other people. It's vulnerability, it's opening yourself up to things. And as long as everyone's in that good place, then I think the partnership can work well, as long as you want the same things.
Totally. And so before we get to the next question, I just want to remind the audience that if you do have questions at any point in time, to please put them in the Q&A function at the bottom. I want to talk about a unique thing to series, which are writing rooms and writing collaborations and partners. And I'll start with you, Kara, because you did mention that you have a writing partner, but I know that you've also been in rooms. So tell us a little bit about how it differs for you, writing alone, writing with someone, writing in a room.
Yeah. So a lot of kids animated shows, you don't write, they'll have a summit. So they'll invite everybody, be like, this is the world, pitch your ideas, we like this, and sort of work it out within a couple days. Because there's so many episodes, it's a budgetary issue. So that's why it's a summit, right? And then you go away. That's how a lot of it works. With a writing partner, I find it's great because it's like a mini writing room. So you kind of, hopefully you lose some of your ego because best ideas should win. But also it's really cool because both of our brains work so differently that it makes it a richer product, I feel. And then working in, then after now working in writing rooms with my partner or without, it's taught me how to collaborate. It's a lot faster. You gotta pitch. Best pitch has to win, and it's more of a time efficiency thing. So I think because it's been really interesting because I've gotten to work in all kind of three aspects alone with a partner in a writing room, and I definitely prefer working with a writing partner because writing is hard. It's really hard. So when you have another sounding board who who's a great, my writing partner is amazing, she's brilliant, kind, and communicative. So it's taught me so much about how to express myself and, in a productive way.
And I imagine it's probably taught you a lot about what your strengths are as a writer.
Yeah, I'm the silly one. I'm like Shane. I'm like, I'm the kid, So when he's like, I'm not serious, I'm like, oh gosh, okay, good. There's other people.
Heidi, it was your first time and you did it in a group scenario. It was you and Perry and one other person, right?
It was just Perry and I for season 1. Annie Briggs story edited a bit. And then our director, as Shane said, our director has been with us for years before we had any money to pay her. She's helped us pitch. She's helped us story edit. She's helped us write. And that was great. We're hoping to have a bit more of a room in January. Mm-hmm. And I know I said I'm really hell-bent on my vision, but stories about other writers' rooms have helped me as a newbie writer. And I've heard some amazing stories from the Jan writing room because Nilu Handa and Elena Uatko are good friends of mine, and Nilu was in Avocado Toast. And just the openness of that room. And I did an interview with Nilu on my podcast, and she told the story about how Kale was originally going to be an older white man. Mm-hmm. And Nilu was like, I think a young woman of color should play this part. And in the room, everyone was like, okay. And Elena got this incredible role to play that she absolutely kills. And for season 2, we've opened up our writing a bit to include Alexander Nunez, who played Jordan in season 1. We just all fell in love with him. And, hearing stories like that do help me if I feel like I'm stuck in my own thing to go to best idea wins, and his ideas are often best. So that's been a good experience for all of us. And I'm so excited to get to do a bit of a room for season 2.
Yeah, that's so great. And I mean, Jennica, this is a natural segue. So what are you looking for when you're staffing so that you can create that room where there seems to be a harmony and an openness?
So just to talk about that Nilu story, which is sort of a famous story now, we like to tell that story because it makes her look good, and we hopefully made a good decision in trusting her. She was right, but she actually did that in her interview phone call. Wow. So we were like, that is a power move to be like, I know I am interviewing for a job. However, I would like to let you know that I think there's a major improvement you could make to your current story world. And here's my pitch for that. And we were just like, she is so correct. And then once we made that change, You know, so many things came out of that change. It was such a, I don't know what the show would be if we had not made that change. So that was obviously a great call, but also like she really put herself out there. And hopefully that was a good indication to her too, that like if she joined our writing room, we want to hear people's ideas. We do take the, really hope we take the best idea. I try in our room, I have started to, before we start a season now, I have started to, I say it out loud, but I also try to say, I actually email people and say, just a reminder that if there's anything that comes up in the room and you don't know if you can sort of like, you have thoughts, or you don't feel comfortable like objecting to something, or to, you know, really pushing back against something, message me directly. Like we'll just talk about it directly then, because for the most part, I think for the most part, our room is really open and people do feel safe. And we've had largely the same writers for from season to season, but we added one writer for season 3, JP LaRock. I don't know if anybody knows JP, but he's a great fit for our room. And so I hope it's a safe place. That's really, really what our goal. But at the same time, I want to just have that extra protection of like, listen, you know, maybe at the moment you're not even sure what it is that's bugging you. Like, you know, call me tonight and we can talk about it. Because I do feel like just more, you know, smart, funny brains, you know, working toward the same goal. That's, you know, and people who are maybe going to have a different, you know, take on something is so key to actually having like, you know, a well-rounded show, a grounded show. So, yay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had a few questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Before we even get in the room, you got to have a good pitch. And there have been questions about, you know, what are ways you can get in a room with a broadcaster or a production company? And once you're in there, how do you capture their attention? So Shane, why don't we ask you first?
Sorry, I laugh as the guy who worked in one room.
Or just pitching in an idea in general.
Yeah, so you know, I guess it's, as other people have sort of alluded to, I mean, it's so much is about your relationships. Obviously, it's sort of like it just is that kind of industry, as we all know, and you know, God, it's really hard. It's hard to pinpoint. Like I didn't go out and sort of say, okay, I'm going to write something then pitch it. That seems like such a difficult thing, you know, for me to put myself in those shoes. It was like, I want to make something. I don't want to get a job. I want to be a part of a team that's making things. I know that's what you're kind of asking there too, but you know, specifically to writing. But so for me, it was like, okay, let's write something, then let's shoot it, and then let's learn from that, and let's do it again, and sort of build some momentum. And for a lot of the filmmakers I know that are also working in writing rooms as writer directors, and that's the path that they have. And I even think about some of the writers that are on Jan that I know and have admired for years, Mike McFadden, and he wrote theater, you know, and I saw his plays, I don't know how many years ago, and he created these vehicles to showcase his voice and his talent. And it seems like that seems to be central to sort of having something. I know there's other ways of writing, people can talk about it, but it's someone who's sort of more about, I want to create something that I can then make with people. It's sort of, how do I learn? How do I create a voice that's unique? And how do I find people that sort of gel with that are now my family? It could be a festival. So for me, it's a lot of imaginative film festival. And that was kind of my path to, you know, whatever this is. So that I would say those are the kind of things I would encourage you to do from my perspective. But I'm sure one of the other writers would have a more like, oh, write a spec script and send it to Bob, and then they'll give it to Dave, and I don't know, something like that'll happen.
Oh, Dave. Everybody loves Dave. But
Can
yeah.
I throw something out there that Shane, I think, mentioned before, which was about kind of confidence in you as a creator and making sure that people that you're pitching to are, you know, can feel like they can trust you with the vision. So I feel like that is pretty key. And how you do that is probably not a straight line, like just figuring out exactly how to do that. But I do feel like having passion and being confident in your own ideas is really important, because people are buying into not just a story or a world or a character or you know, a sort of a docs series, much like your series, but it's like, it's not just that idea. It's also who's going to be executing this, and do I think they can do it, and do I think that they will fight for that, you know, story or the quality or whatever it is. So I think it's pretty important. Kara has.
Can I kind of jumping off of that, and what kind of Shane and Heidi have gone on about making trailers and teasers and actually trying to do that stuff. That helped my writing partner and I so much at first when we didn't have those relationships. So we'd make something that looked damn good because we found a very good DP. And then it opens the doors and it shows exactly what you can do for $0. And it gives you that confidence. I wouldn't say spec script. I'd say like a teaser, and sometimes you got to write the pilot, sometimes you got to write the pitch. It just depends. But also, before going to a broadcaster, finding that producing partner, because they usually don't want to open the door to just anybody.
Speaking of, you know, the dollars of it all, I've had some questions about contracting and negotiating deals. And I'm wondering if there's any things that we can recommend as creators that people keep in mind when asking for deals and when negotiating deals.
Well,
I mean, I can only speak to digital content, and unfortunately, fortunately, to apply for the grants that funded us, the production company has to have 100% copyright of your idea. So that's not a negotiation I've ever been able to consider. I mean, after reading about Michaela Cole, like turning down Netflix, I was like, oh, I get a big TV show. But as the big word that seems to be the buzzword is trust. You know, I trust my producer, absolutely. And I'm producing with him now on other shows, and it's been the best decision I ever made. But it's sort of like, it's a very big decision to sign your whole copyright over to somebody else. So you guys probably have a lot more to say about it.
I recently did this preschool pitch where there was music involved, and there was a lot of items to the property, right? So we decided to start working. It didn't work out, which also often happens, but they were willing to give us 50% because we were going to come in as creative producers, because we had to generate so much of that content. So also, if you are able to, it's very hard, but like, be like, you can't actually make this without us, and we need to be at the upper levels as well. You know, it just depends on how big the production company is too, or what you're dealing with, what kind of material you're dealing with. But that was weird, and it didn't work out. So
we're really lucky that we've always been treated that way. But that won't always be the case if you sign your copyright over. So it is something to think about.
I think a couple of things that come up for me are, and I'm thinking too about stuff that doesn't necessarily happen, but it's sort of like, it's something you've created, it's something you're putting out there, you're pitching it. If you've got a partner, a writing partner, or a producing partner, figuring out how to protect yourself in the future if you can. And one of the ways you can do that is by looking at those timelines, like, when do I get this back if nothing happens, and making sure you're comfortable with that, because it is painful to have a passion project that is sitting in somebody's drawer because they technically can do that, and for whatever reason the passion for it has cooled, or a bunch of rejections. Something that happens a lot is people are excited because they have an idea for where to pitch in Canada, and then if it doesn't immediately happen, they don't necessarily have a sense of where's the next step, or they don't necessarily, maybe they're not the perfect partner that can take you to the States or can take you to digital in a more meaningful way. And then you realize, oh, it's just like tied up, and I want to move it forward, but I'm kind of, with a partner that it's not a priority anymore. So looking at deadline timelines, when can I have it back? And I think trying to request, I think the phrase is meaningful consultation going forward, which apparently people do actually respect that idea of meaningful consultation. But, in the case where you've created something, maybe it goes forward in a big way, but they want to attach someone really senior to it. And so there's going to be more voices at the table. You want to make sure that your vision and your voice are actually going to be part of that. And so you want to make sure that's sort of in your contract, that like, even if X, Y, or Z happens, I want meaningful consultation in the creative process. So if you can get that, go for that.
I had a question about contracts and agreements between collaborators. And so for the folks on the panel who work with writing partners, are you papering stuff right at the beginning to make sure that, you know, ownership is very clear, or like we're 50-50, or we are to meaningfully consult at every stage of the game? What kind of agreements are you setting out? Or would you recommend that people set out?
You can do an easy general agreement between two people. I mean, I'm so trustful. It's always a verbal agreement, but I've been working with my writing partner for like 7 years. So, but yeah, just in case, you never know. So writing out something very simple where each of you sign and date, there's no harm in that.
Mm-hmm. Shane, I saw you nodding about being trusting, or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, Dwayne and I only do the contracts when somebody's like, oh, we need a chain of title. I'm like, oh, right, yeah, blah, blah. So, you know, I haven't created anything with people that weren't part of a core group of people that I really trusted. Like, so it's always just been, it's very, very, very easy. And I like Heidi, when like creating the avocado and toast thing, it's sort of like you just sort of connect together so closely that you couldn't imagine doing it with anybody else from both sides. So that was that's the way it's always, the projects have fallen out that way. It's like, oh, I love this. Oh, I love that. Now we fit like a glove. And then we're like, oh yeah, we should do something legally at some point, and then we approach it that way. Sorry, I'm unhelpful, panel. It's more family and relationships. It's so easy, and I like to keep it that way, and then later we get into the other stuff. I don't go in with the other things, professionalism.
There's different kinds of like ways of generating a whole show, right? I mean, there's one is from the ground up, like these are the people that I want to be working with, and here's what we want to do. And then over here, it's like, here is an idea that a producer has, and you know, do you want to be involved in this? Do you want to sign on to develop it and go pitch it? And that is something that happens to us too. And we, you know, it is different because it's not like, you don't start with the trust necessarily. You're starting with a story and you're kind of like starting to build that trust, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore paperwork covers you sometimes.
So let's circle back to an element of building the series, which are notes and you know, creative control, and knowing when to take something on and when to stand your ground. And Shane, I want to start with you because you are so different in this group, in that it's a music doc series that had to have a very clear idea as you go into it. Can you talk a little bit about like when you get notes throughout that process, and when you personally feel like you need to push back on something?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say that we work so closely with the directors throughout pre-production, outlining and scripting what their doc episode would be. Every episode has a kind of a recipe. There's a time. We know how long each episode is, you know, when all the commercial breaks are, how long each act should be. So there was kind of like a strict, almost dogmatic, like, you know, follow this recipe and create within that. And there's so, now people would then, you know, twist and offer things, but once they understood the recipe, it was so much easier to sort of have the improvisation or new ideas and to affect that. So by the time that they were going, just because we had no money to just, it wasn't like a verite doc shoot or something where people could just explore. It was like, you have to go, you only have 3 days, you got to go out, you just got to get your stuff. Just, that's it. Unfortunately, there's no time for that other kind of magic. We just have to have it in pre-production and the planning. And you know, again, as a director, that's sort of that background coming from that pre-production place of, you know, well, unless you pre-produce it, then you're not going to visualize it beforehand. It's going to be hard to execute when you're rushing around with no money. So that was the part where by the time we had the edit together, it was pretty tight. Like we really had worked through a lot of those things. And of course, there was discoveries along the way, always these amazing surprises. And some episodes were quite different from what they originally were meant to be, because, you know, as an interview happens, somebody opens up to this new story and suddenly you're over here. And so we would respond to that. But what was great about it was the recipe that what would make the show work over time and the duration as you sit and watch it, that was kind of locked in and baked in. And we sent the pilot. We were terrified. Like, I I joke here, but when I sent it in, I'm like, I nailed that. That is really good. And if there's any notes, they're all wrong. and the notes that came back were those things where it was just like, could you clarify these couple things? And you're like, right. I knew all the backstory. I knew all the stuff that was coming beforehand. I have all this other stuff that's not on the screen. So yeah, that's a good point. We need to fix a couple of those introductions. Maybe some of those lines of connection were a little loose. Let me just fix that. And it was very, very simple. So it's like 4 notes, 3 notes per episode, very easy, very contextual to understanding the context of the story. And it was, again, it was really simple and lovely, and it was no problem. It was very fast. So the notes, there was no debates. Now, if you want to ask me about other productions that will remain nameless, working on Indigenous productions with Indigenous crew, Indigenous story, characters, there can be a lot of bumps. There can be a lot of bumps there. A lot of times, the expression I use is, and again, maybe this doesn't matter for some of the comedy stuff, but maybe it does. Someone will say to me, someone has said to me, oh, Shane, you as a Métis person, you're bringing your politics into the thing. This is an apolitical project. Excuse me? You're suggesting that you are apolitical, the Canadian norm, whatever that is, and somehow I'm political because I have a different worldview from the way I was raised and who are my community, who are my people. That doesn't, we all have, so there are times when you can bump with some notes, and it's I come from a very political, passionate family, so you kind of have to tone that down and find your way back to the humanity again. It can be tricky, it can be tough. And then some notes are hurtful because they're so right. And I have very close friends that say something like, this first act sucks. And you're like, really? And then they break it down. You're like, yeah, it does. And then you gotta live with that for a little bit. So sometimes I'm not always right.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, Jennica, I feel like as the showrunner, you probably are like the first line of defense in getting notes, and it's up to you to decide which ones make their way to the room and which ones, can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah. That is part of what I do. And I would say I've had some, Jan is the first time that I have been a showrunner, and in trying to craft who I would be as a showrunner, I tried to look at many showrunners I've had and look at sort of the things I found that worked really smoothly and that were really, seemed like a good approach. And so I've just stolen all of those things. So I've had a couple of showrunners who their approach to notes was, first of all, it was kind of like, look, whatever you're feeling about notes, if they come in, you can have whatever feelings you want, just like sit on it for a minute. I do prefer notes by email for that reason, as opposed to like a phone call, because I like to see them. First of all, I think people are more articulate when they have to actually write it out, and they get closer to what they mean. And I know, because I've done it too, sometimes you start a note and you're like, if I can't articulate that, I'm just going to delete that. I'm not even going to include that one. So I think email notes are great. And then usually I will sit with them and just have whatever little feelings I have, because feelings are fine. Feelings aren't a thing. They're just like, it's okay. And then actually, give it a minute and then look at it and say, okay, what's real? And there's always real stuff. Clarifications for sure, but there's always genuine, like, character questions, things like that are all very fair. And what I had seen from other showrunners was sort of looking at them and actually making the note and saying under each note, coming from, say, a network, and saying, here's, yes, we'll take a look at that. Here's how we're going to address that. You know what? This is not a problem because we're going to cut it anyway. Things like that. And then sometimes when you want to push back, just saying, here's why we really want to keep what we have. It's really important to us. We want to, that this is what it's intended to be. If that's not coming through, we will work to bolster it and make sure it is earned or whatever, but we will push back in that way. So I do want, let's say execs that I'm working with to understand that I am like hearing and thinking about all of the suggestions. and they're often very good and very doable. And then sometimes it's like, I'll just explain, why I think it, and then sometimes we even have to, go further into it and have a further conversation about it. But that's what I saw as a model. And so that's how I respond, is I literally respond to notes that come in on Jan and just say, yep, no problem. Yep, we'll do that. And it's an ongoing conversation that way.
Mm-hmm. Heidi, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your experience with that, because as you said, the work is so personal, but I also had a question from the audience for you that kind of relates to that. So coming from an acting perspective and using like personal content to generate a series, can you talk a little bit more about finding relationships and like the mentors to get your project made, especially when it reflects an underrepresented demographic in the industry?
Yeah. I mean, initially, close friends were mentoring me and helping me through that process. I think Perry and I also like witnessed each other's experiences. We were smushed together at a very specific time in our lives, and we watched each other go through what we were writing about. So we were sort of there to help each other remember what it was like, even when it sucked. And then we were really, really lucky to meet Sam Coyle. And it's interesting making queer content, writing queer characters, because you can't ask anyone what their sexuality is. That's up to them to tell you when they're ready to. And I definitely, for a while, was like, I just don't know if Sam's the right person. I just needed someone to have my experience. And that trust needed to build. And eventually it did. And I trust her implicitly. And the note sessions with her were incredible, because she was able to help me pinpoint what I was trying to say. And not only that, I was looking at things for a long time through my lens of it. And eventually she helped me get there to translate it so that other people could experience it or understand it in different ways outside of what I experienced. But yeah, the trust thing. And I'll be honest, I'm not someone who trusts first. I'm someone who doesn't trust first. And it takes me a while to build up the trust.
It's good to know your process, honestly. Yeah. Question about kids TV. I'm going to throw it to you, Kara, obviously. Audience is so specific for kids. And can you talk a little bit about kind of what research you're putting into audience and who your show is eventually going to reach and how it tailors to your content?
Yeah. So it depends on, if you have this kernel of an idea, then you're like, what networks could I see it? You have to think about that and have some forethought about like vision about where you could see it placed, right? And if you can't, YouTube Kids, they got a big click-through rate. You make money. So it's not necessarily a bad place to be. So it's sort of, I think, looking at the whole marketplace, looking at the network, what it has, and where you think there's holes, because there is so much noise out there in the kids space. You really need to be very specific so that you can cut through, kind of thing.
Amazing. We're winding down here, but this is kind of a question for everyone, so it might be our last question. Let's talk about the COVID of it all. How has the pandemic changed your process, and where are you finding inspiration?
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll go.
Or Jennica.
I have like kind of a very specific, clear answer to that, I guess. So for Jan, we're renewed for season 3, and our writing, we basically are just in the late stages of writing the whole season. And normally we'd be shooting this time of year or just finishing, and instead we've pushed a little bit for largely, all the the year, the 2020 build to getting things going took a little longer. And so for COVID reasons, so we're pushing it. We're going to do prep and production in the new year. And creatively, we are not addressing COVID. We talked about it, and I know a lot of dramas and procedurals are just going for it, and just like people are in masks and it's part of the world. And I think that does make sense. For us, we were like, we kind of want to be an escapist comedy. We want it to be light. We got a lot of feedback when we were airing in September and October this year. People who were very grateful that it was like a break from the real world. And so we felt like that's what we would want to. So we're leaning into that. And then there's also the problem of time. Like if we shoot in the new year, I think the earliest we would be airing is fall 2021, when hopefully the vaccines have been rolled out entirely. So we're like, can you imagine watching a comedy in October 2021 and you have to watch everybody in masks and you're like, you just got rid of this shit. So I think we were just like, no, we're not going to take that chance.
I think a lot of people probably feel the same way. Kara, where are you finding your inspiration?
Kitchen animation, because you don't need masks for that. I also, as a writer, you know, I took a writing class about because I hadn't written my own pilot, and so I just completed that. That maybe I can even be in. So, like, just sort of, you know what? I went, look at this year. It is a piece of crap. What do I actually want to do? Pie, sky, also animation, because it's still going. So I did a lot of those Zoom rooms.
Killer. Shane?
Very much in like the Jan show, you know, the different doc productions. We did a shoot, you know, it was COVID safe. People with masks. I just remembered how frustrated I was watching The Dark Knight with the Bane mask and just not being able to understand. It's just like so much is translated in reading lips, and it's just I was like, this is awful. Just to watch it, I don't want to see it. And then exactly as discussed, you know, thinking, you know, this story's bigger than this particular moment, which is very traumatic, but we want something feeling timeless. So we just said, let's hit the pause button and wait until we can do something with these materials after. So it's been very lucky and fortunate. There's been a lot of investment in development on projects. So it's been great. It actually, I think we'll wind up making a few of these projects better just because we have this time just to research more and write more without this sort of like, oh, everyone else is shooting, we better start shooting. So, you know, it's been really great that way. In terms of inspiration, I mean, you know, there's endless podcasts and other TV shows, and sadly my mom would be happy, but I'm now completely addicted to The Crown. So I don't know, maybe there's like an indigenous Crown version I'm going to think of here with my friends in the next while.
Heard it here first. Heidi, really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, our team didn't really get a pause or a break. We had no boredom because we launched in May. And since then, all of the conventions and things we were going to go fly and do turned online. So we've just been on Zoom for months. We've won over 20 awards at different festivals. That's been extremely rewarding as a producer and incredible to share the story that far. And then I've just been like a squirrel shoving nuts in my cheeks. I contributed to 3 different projects getting funded or partially funded, and we've got broadcasters, and Border to Border Entertainment's going to be very busy. We've got things to do whenever we're able to. Yeah, so that's been good. And I May Destroy You, Michaela Cole was my biggest inspiration during that time. So.
Fantastic. Well, this was so great. I look forward to the Indigenous Crown and everybody else's amazing work that you've got coming up. I'm going to throw back to Katie at the Academy. There she is.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I always feel so bizarre just like popping up after that conversation. Thank you so much. That was such an amazing conversation to hear and to get to sit on my side of things. So I just wanted to give another really huge thank you to Heidi, Jennica, Kara, Shane, and Lauren for sharing your insight today and taking some time out of your busy Zoom schedules to join us.